Give yourselves a little round of applause. Sincerely though, there's lots of things that you can do with your Sundays other than come to the Evaluator Summit. So thank you very much. You are some of my favorite people. And speaking of my favorite people, they're on this panel here. We're very lucky to have them. Some of them came from far away. So we very much appreciate that. I'm going to introduce them real quick, and then we'll let them take care of it. This is our final session. Also, thank you to 734 Coffee, my name. Thanks again to Margaret, of course. Our submission deadline for proposals is March 1st. If you want something reviewed, get it to us by March 1st. Our closing session is about challenges, and we're lucky to have some folks who run different and unique and fairly significant challenges. And I'm gonna, and also folks who have worked with Unfunded lists in one way or another. So I'll go, I suppose we'll start with the prettiest one, Jeff. Jeff currently is Vice President of something, Knowledge Management, at Lever for Change, which is an affiliated program of the prestigious MacArthur Foundation. Previously, Jeff was a program officer in the philanthropy support program. Got us our first grant from MacArthur and also our second grant from MacArthur, and will be very, very helpful for getting our third grant from MacArthur. Because he did such a great job identifying our funded list and funding us, they promoted him right over to Lever for Change. Which is a really cool and exciting challenge. It's a $100 million grant. And they gave the first one to Sesame Street and IRC to create a Levant Arabic version of Sesame Street. That I believe just premiered recently, right? Which is really, really awesome. And they're going to do it again. They're going to give $100 million away again. And what I really like about it is they published the unfunded list from that challenge. And has been able to raise some money for some of the folks that did not actually win. Speaking of support to the unfunded list, the Solve Challenge at MIT, run by Amouyel, they cared very much about it. They make their challenge participants fill out long applications, and the finalists all go to New York to do a pitch. But only 30 or so were actually going to get Solve challenges. So they wanted to make sure to do something extra for the 30 folks who go all the way to New York, pitch, and were otherwise going to go home and done. So this last round, we got feedback for all 60 of the Solve finalists and delivered feedback reports to everybody after the decisions. And for the folks who were up in New York who did not win, Margaret and I went up and I had sort of a marathon series of meetings with all of them. Right? So it was like, you did not win the fellowship, but you get to meet with Margaret or Dave if you were unlucky. It was a lot of work for us, but it was a very, very enjoyable. I think it really worked out well, and I'm excited that we're going to be doing it again. Next round. So if you evaluate for us, there's a good chance you'll be bringing some Solve runners up. And that's a big area of growth for us. We'd love to be supporting lots of other challenges in that way. We also sometimes will help challenges recruit judges for their programs. GW, who helped us find this space, we help them find judges for their pitch competitions and student business plan competitions. Nancy runs one of the world's largest competitions for high school students. We provided about a dozen or so judges. I'm proud to say all of our judges completed their assignments.
Yes. Unusual.
Our moderator for today, Becky, is one of our evaluators. And she is also no stranger to competition. I'll let her talk about that. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Everybody for coming. As a reminder, our motto is Compario Conloquor. Exaudeo Compario Conloquor. Thank you. Which means to listen, to learn, to speak. So I hope everybody in every session that we do gets a chance to listen, learn, and speak a little bit. Becky will moderate, and then also hopefully we get some questions from the audience and everything. And then we'll be swiftly out the door once it is. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Dave.
You going to sit here?
No, you're good.
So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm really pleased to be here, to be able to moderate the session. I think that today's panel will be very insightful, as well as I think great ways for you to find new ways in thinking about how to fundraise. But also I think that in learning more about challenges over the last, couple of days, as well as in doing more research, realizing that the challenge is not a new concept. And I think there's a lot of best practices that we can learn from looking at the individual challenges that are out today and how successful they are and what they can do in terms of your purpose. So my first question I wanted to ask Jeff, what do you see as some of the key issues and challenges with the explosion of the use of the challenge and social impact, as well as how have you seen the use of social media also impact the use of the challenge?
All right, well, I'll give the pitch for challenges and why I think they're different from a usual grant-making approach. So one is that they push the strategy in each project back out to the people that are being funded. So a lot of traditional philanthropy right now is based on a strategy that's developed inside a funding organization. And challenges reverse that, or they, depending on how they're designed, they can reverse that. They can also push some of the decision-making authority that's typically inside a funding organization out to experts. So somewhere in heaven, there's a funding organization that makes awards based on who knows the most about the topic. And just given the breadth of problems in the world, it's really very difficult to do that if most of the smartest people in the world work for somebody else. I think that's Phil Joy's law. Taking account of that and having the funding decision be influenced by outside experts, I think is quite different. Related to that, something like 70%, this is a figure from the Foundation Center's Brad Smith, now called Candid, 70% of major foundation programs are closed to unsolicited proposals. So that's an effort to reduce the amount of noise in the system and to be, yes, we're talking to you because we want to invite a proposal from you so you know we mean it. You're not wasting your time sending us stuff that is going to get a rejection. But if you have 70% of the programs closed, you have to wonder how responsive is the field of philanthropy to what it doesn't already know. When things go well, with challenges the way they're being designed now, you can write an application once and have it seen by many funders. I think that's a world that we're trying to go towards. We're not all the way there. And then lastly, with the challenges, I think it pushes the organizations that launch them to think differently and more deeply about their priorities. What do you really care about here? And not just up front, but when you are confronted with more really good, really high quality, very deserving ideas that you have the resources to fund, it forces some re-examination inside the organization. So particularly for new funders, I think it's an interesting model.
That's good.
And so there.
I can keep going. But
Well, and if, to answer some of the question about the challenges, if that's okay with the challenges, I think you do see this huge explosion. Everybody's doing a prize competition and a challenge, and it ranges from $5,000 to $100 million is probably the largest one, as far as we know, until somebody else comes along.
Beat us, yeah.
And there are, Jeff has given you all the sort of good things, and there are plenty of pitfalls, I would say. A lot of them are badly designed around and they're not clear, and this is what we were talking about, Nancy, on what the goals are they trying to achieve are. Is it about educating students? Is it about driving innovation? Is it about scaling impact? And that's sort of like three different things that perhaps we do. And that requires very different ways of handling the challenge and defining the criteria and being clear to applicants so that they're not wasting their time, because obviously at the end, a lot of people are filling out your application form, and the risk is you're wasting a lot of people's time if it's not clear and well adapted. What I particularly like, I like how you say the idea of driving the strategy out of the program officer's head and an ivory tower and into the field. Although I think I see plenty of challenges which sort of answer the question in the question they're asking. So rather than actually defining the problem that they want to see solved, they sort of put too many, instead of saying we need to get 3 billion people, I'm using an extreme example, 2.7 billion people who don't have access to affordable renewable energy, they'll be like nuclear fusion for across communities, and you're like, okay, you've already defined the answer and you can't drive nuclear currently. That's somebody else at MIT somewhere who's doing that type of research. And I think the last thing is, certainly for Solve, I think the people here who are sort of in the best practices of challenges, is a lot of the challenges can be a bit showcasey, right? There's one winner, and it's clap, 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 have a gala with nice dresses and a check, and however many thousands or millions of dollars, and then one person wins, and that's it, and there's no support after that. And I think we know, certainly for Solve, winning the challenge, first of all, we take a portfolio of winners because we're trying to drive innovation, and we believe in sort of venture. There's not one silver bullet which is going to solve the challenge of educating refugees today. But so it shouldn't be one solution. And two, winning the competition and the prize for us is just the beginning of then a whole program where we're supporting these entrepreneurs to really, hopefully, validate their impact and scale their work. So it's not finished after the ceremony.
In response to both of your sort of answers, have you then seen, is there a better way to then get those applicants, or even better way in tools of getting them to apply, or even the process of applying and the questions being asked and sort of that competition piece? Have you seen, or maybe have advice on how to improve that system?
Me?
I
haven't spoken yet.
Yeah.
So let me dial around, if I may. So we work with kids who are 13 to 18 years old from all over the world. And it went global organically. We never just did a big outreach, come on down. They just came. And I believe some of that has to do with, it's a democratization of education, which I think is incredibly important to the centerpiece of what we do. So all kids can be part of designing the future. This is active education. We call it pull education. What happens in a classroom is push, learn this, if you do it better, you win, and you pass a test and you get a score, and now you're a rock star. The kids that we work with, we pull. We say, create a solution to a global or local challenge that's commercially viable, that can really do something to improve the future. And our kids work in categories. This is serious stuff. They work in aerospace, energy, cybersecurity, health, smoke-free world, ed tech. We have kids creating technologies for the classroom. So you have the consumer creating for the consumer of education. It's kind of interesting. So, and like you, winning's the beginning. We used to give our kids money. We're in this 14 years now. I was much taller when I began. And we used to give them money. We found out it was too much not to do anything and not enough to do what they really needed to do. So we give them opportunities. And one of those opportunities is to get a patent. And the kids own their IP. They can do whatever they want with it. We do not want kids dropping out of high school or not going to college and creating companies. That is not our goal. Our goal is really to get kids to learn how to think and to learn how to learn. So I tell people I don't have a PhD, but I do have a GSD. I get stuff done. And all of our, I could use another word. All of our kids get a GSD, and it turns out the Conrad Challenge certificate is one of the top credentials for university admission. Go figure. So that's one of the opportunities that is a child of this kind of work. That's really exciting to me, and that's just like, oh my God, we actually did what we've set out to do. That was our goal, to bring these kids into that kind of democratization of education. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I sure got my soapbox.
It was good. It was on inclusivity. So then a broader question, I think, going back to talking about the use of the challenge, and why do you think the challenges could be a good tool for somebody depending on their goal, and then also seeing how can you explain to our people in the audience about the differences between use of a challenge versus traditional fundraising?
Well, challenge isn't a tool for fundraising.
But in comparison to traditional fundraising.
Grant
Hmm.
making,
Yeah, I
You
think
go.
wrong.
Yeah, because I don't know what that means.
Well, so I mean, I think Jeff answered part of that at the beginning in his intro. I think the issue with traditional grant making or traditional access to capital, right, be it grant making or investor dollars or that type of thing, is that it's a closed game. If you grew up in a certain place and you went to certain universities, including MIT probably, and you have much better access to various forms of funding than if you didn't. And I think that we certainly, and as Jeff said, 70%, when you talk about philanthropy, 70% of, your quote was 70% of foundations don't take closed RFPs. That means they don't accept any open applications. And so you see that the people who are getting a lot of the money are the traditional people who've always got the money. You're not really, and this is the case for Solve, you're not necessarily driving innovation. And we certainly believe that you're not going to solve the SDGs if you just plow in more money to all the solutions that have existed already, and that you need to innovate and drive innovation towards social and environmental impact. That means taking risks, that means investing in new people, and that means having much broader diversity of people. Ideally, the people who are solving the problems are the people who are in the communities facing these problems as well. They're not Americans going to Africa, to take a very stereotypical aid worker thing. And so the opportunity of a challenge is that anybody can apply.
Yeah, it opens the aperture to everyone to participate in solutions.
Yeah, and the problem is still going to be, how do you try and eliminate bias? How do you help people who, obviously, if you took a course on entrepreneurship, or you did a previous accelerator, or your English is your first language, you're going to be probably better positioned at filling out our application than if you're not. And so it's up to us, I think, to think of ways to try and level the playing field, which is a similar struggle to, let's say, MIT trying to level the playing field for its university admissions, right? And it's not an easy task, because you can't right the wrongs of the world since people were born. But yeah, one of the things we're doing very briefly is we're launching, it actually launches on March 3rd. If anybody wants to, you can enroll now. But we're launching a course on MITx, which is an online course around business and impact planning for social enterprises. So basically it's a course, you get a certificate from MIT if you so desire, but it teaches you how to do a business and impact plan, which happens to map exactly to our application form. And so it means that hopefully people who are not familiar with how to write a business and impact plan can take the course and improve their application and also get a certificate. So even if they're not successful, they get something out of it.
Thank you. Jeff, what are some of the best practices that you can share that you've seen within your work, but also obviously being in this space and seeing, what some challenges have done incorrectly?
Just take a
Sorry,
time out.
yeah, a little
Wait,
technical.
time out.
I'm like, these are not my strong suits.
That was not a good thing.
Right. Okay, just one big time out here.
You have to get the strings lined
How
up.
many engineers does it take?
Good one. See, I should be an MIT joke.
Yeah.
Right there, pull it this way.
You have to try to.
Just me,
No, it was being funny. I just felt like I just.
Pull it.
Now let's just get the strings lined up.
Oh, there we go.
Yay! You get a GSD, babe.
I think just that one.
Margaret, I think it's the one.
Okay.
That was
That
like
one.
that line.
Well done. I'm like,
We're good. Okay.
So we're back.
Okay, all right. So I think the gold standard is people find other sources of support that are not with the original funder. I think there's some other things that go along with that. I think very often people learn something through the process, which is why I keep coming back to this fill out the grant application, get course credit, or complete the course and have a grant application as a result. I think the way applications are shared has a lot of room for growth and understanding. We make the applications that we get available, but we don't make them entirely available, and that's because I think that for most applicants, there's sort of a double-edged feeling. If you say, I want to take your application and I want to offer it to other funders, there's no objection, right? But I want to take your application and it will be offered in a public way. Very often there's a sense of, oh my gosh, what am I exposing about myself? Are you putting me at a disadvantage relative to other people who have succeeded in the competition? Will it make me look bad? And those are very legitimate concerns. And so I think somehow making it okay to show your public participation without disadvantage is an area where maybe some norms in the field need to evolve. But I think that that's an important aspect of what we're doing, because it allows people to learn from each other. Somebody described the way the World Wide Web grew a lot, in part was because very, very early in the early browsers, there was a menu item that said developer view, or view tools, or view code, view source. I think it was view source, that was the thing. And everyone could go to somebody else's web page they admired and view the source and see how it was built. And that caused people to learn quickly how to build a functioning site. And I think when the applications are open, you can get that when they're well done. You can see a little bit of view source. Here's what worked well with someone else who received funding. And that's been okay, I think, largely until now. No one knows why decisions go the way that they go, but maybe looking at the applications gives you a sense of that.
There's no intellectual property question?
Well, so there is, and the way we chose to deal with it was to make that kind of sharing a condition of participation.
That's great.
And so, again, there's a broad claim around that on our part, it's a condition of participation. On the other hand, we really want to respect the views and the desires of the people who are participating, and that gets back to that tension of, yes, show me off in a good light. Don't show me at a disadvantage relative to other people. Do put me in front of other donors. I mean, there's really a set of tensions around that are not possible to resolve in a universal way, because different people have a different sense of that.
Do you have like best practice you can share?
Well, we're definitely we're completely open. So I think, well, actually, I think we debated it and we took it. There was maybe 2 or 3 questions that we don't share with the judges, and which have to do with demographics and things like that, just because we don't want to bias we want to know the demographics for our purposes, and we don't want to bias the judges. But we have lots of terms and conditions, and indeed, if you have if you have a mini nuclear fusion reactor which works in like Sierra Leone, which you can't, but say you do, don't put the source code of the on the bloody application, right? Like, so if you want to keep that IP, so if people are clear that it's all going to be published and all going to be shared, they're hopefully they're hopefully using their common sense to share what their things. I think what makes it interesting in some of the conversations I've had with Jeff around this is we're starting to see we have about 117 and counting 117,000 platform users, and we have thousands, I don't know, 6,000 or 7,000 applications so far. So a lot of the platform users are commentators and voters. They don't necessarily, and a lot of the applications are teams. So you can have 10 people on a team technically. So, so that's sort of why the numbers are quite different in orders of magnitude. But you start to see a map of innovation around the world on particular topics. So on educating refugees, on the circular economy, on healthy cities. So these are some of the challenges we've run. And I think that makes it really interesting of seeing actually if, and we don't, even though I'm at MIT and we should have all the data scientists in the world, I still don't get as many as I need. But you should be able to see trends. And so notably, what are things that are innovative business models that are popping up in similar places? And actually, could you get those people to collaborate rather than compete on, ed tech solutions, which are similar in Kenya and Indonesia and India? We see, a lot of copycat type things, and that's a good thing. If it's working in India, and there's no reason it shouldn't work in Kenya if it's well adapted to the local environment. And similarly, you could see, then you can see what's maybe truly innovative and different, right? And then you could also see maybe what's missing. Why, when we launched a Coastal Communities Challenge, we know, so like thinking about coastal and shore ecosystems and the resiliency of coasts and how we're all going to fall in the water due to climate change and it's acidifying and it's terrible. We know that mangroves and coral reef restoration are absolutely key as natural barriers to climate change and sort of improving resiliency, and yet we didn't see a lot of solutions and we didn't end up selecting, there was barely any who applied and we didn't select them. Why is that? If we didn't go and find the right people, we don't have like perfect information, we don't have perfect promotion, or, and this becomes sort of, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but anyway, this becomes interesting, or is it that there's some sort of fundamental research missing or linchpin technology that isn't available, which means that mangrove restoration is actually really difficult and isn't working properly? And is there somewhere else, like maybe at MIT, maybe elsewhere, where you could direct research dollars to those linchpin technologies? So it starts to, if you can sort of catalyze the data in the right way, it starts to really open up a lot of possibilities that we're not yet doing, by the way, because I need some data scientists if anybody knows anyone.
Jeff, you look like you were about to say it.
Yeah. One of the things that really stuck with me, just kind of a follow-up to your point, was the Gates Foundation has had a Grand Challenges program for a long time, and they had a program called Grand Challenges Explorations. And they saw thousands of grant proposals and they published them. But the person who was directing that program pointed out that if you wanted to know what was going to be in medical literature 4 years from now, you could get a pretty decent sense of at least some of what it would be if you read the grant applications that he was considering today. Because by the time he funded something and the project was completed and the peer-reviewed article was accepted by an eminent journal somewhere, that much time had elapsed. So this kind of anticipatory quality of grant applications, I think, is something that we haven't really fully begun to explore or understand, but that's something that I think is interesting.
And some of the ideas that come out of these kids, because they don't know they can't do things, and we don't tell them, it'd be fascinating to track some of the things that are coming out of their minds and how those evolve like 3 or 4 years later as the rigor of what's actually happening. It's really pretty fascinating. I want to share too that one of the things that we do, we work closely with the USPTO, the patent office, because we ask our kids to get provisional patents when they get selected to come to Kennedy Space Center, where we host our Innovation Summit. We want them protected. It's their idea. We don't want somebody just grabbing it from them and running around going, oh my God, I got this great idea and I'm going to go make $1 bazillion out of it. It's there as a teaching tool. So our kids get provisional patents when they come to Summit. And in fact, one of the PTO, the head of education there, is going to do a whole session with teachers on provisional patents and the whole patent process. And we have some top tier law firms that work with our students that actually, they go to full patent. And it's interesting because I just spoke to one of our teams because of the fires in Australia. And one of our teams some years ago developed a fabric. Part of the problem with the Kevlar suits that these firefighters wear is they just weigh a ton and they get exhausted and some of them actually die from the exhaustion. These kids had developed a different fabric that was fireproof, very lightweight. And I called them because actually a group that you and I are involved with is doing a whole intervention in Australia to help with the fires. And I said, what happened with that fabric? He said, we just got our patent. And I said, oh my gosh, well, maybe we can help you commercialize it and deploy it and help the firefighters in Australia. So you never know where that's going to actually happen. We've got another team that created a way to put out fires using sound. So they're going to start working with those kids. I mean, it's amazing what these kids come up with. So when you look at the footprint that these kids are putting forward and the young people that you're working with, I think it really leads a pathway to some of the innovations and the solutions that are like, Microsoft has been working on. And they're 3 and 4 years down the road. It'd be great to be able to map these things, which right now we're not doing because we just don't have the tools, resources, etc. That's it's an unmet need and it's there. We got to do it. So, okay, soapbox put away.
Yeah. So going maybe some interest, obviously, of people in the audience, what advice could you give for an applicant, for successful, obviously, for their application, as well as if you have any advice for a reviewer, for an evaluator as well?
Sure. And then also interested in questions from the audience if we have time. I think for applicants is it is worth spending time, unfortunately, researching the field and locating really what fits. Like if it's a square peg in a round hole, you are probably wasting your time. Especially if it's well advertised and there's good money involved. Like we get routinely, the first category we have is alignment to the challenge. And routinely things are great ideas, but they don't align to the challenge. So they're out. And why did you waste several hours doing that? Now I think you get better as our platform has more and more challenges. There'll be more, so it'll be relevant to more and more people, but nonetheless. And so I think it's sort of, and unfortunately, spending a bit of time understanding how these applications work, they're kind of all the same though, and that's the good news and kind of why we created the course, is they're kind of asking you the same thing. What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is your solution? Why is it innovative? What do you need to really, what are the barriers that you need to overcome, and do you have a good sense of what you would do with the money or whatever support we would give you? And ta-da, that's basically all of them, right? So it's worth getting good at that because you see it time and time again. And that's unfortunate, but hopefully this course helps a bit in that way. And then counterintuitively, perhaps, but it's because it's a good story, a financial institution that shall remain nameless launched a badly designed challenge with mostly internal judges to this financial institution, opened the challenge for a month only didn't seem to advertise it anywhere, and had 10 $1 million grants to give out, and received 136 applications.
I like the odds.
Which
I want to sign up for
and
that.
so one of the, I know this because I had never heard about them, but it's somebody who applied to our challenge, for which we received 500 applications, and they didn't get selected, but they got selected for this one because there were so good odds. So I guess it's like, yeah, it's sort of counterintuitive, but sometimes you can find, in the badly designed challenges, you can find good opportunities. Because I was like, and because literally, I mean, the idea was good, but it was a conceptual idea, so we were never going to select it because we don't select concepts, and so why he applied, I don't know, because he didn't read the instructions in that sense, but he got $1 million for a completely conceptual idea. And he's like, he's a good guy, so like, I think he'll do good with $1 million, but I was like, good for you. So,
Would you like to adopt some kids and have to
I mean, I think it'll be a good. I think it's a good solution. So it'll be like, but it was badly, but yeah, the odds were great. So
Yeah, there you go. I think with our evaluators, and thank you to everyone in this room who evaluated some of our students' projects. We bow deeply to all of our evaluators. I think that recognizing who you're evaluating, I mean, these are kids, 13 to 18 years old.
great
So I
audience,
guess
yeah.
be kind is a nice, nice thing to do.
And construction.
Constructive criticism, constructive evaluation, not criticism, constructive guidance. And we don't use the word mentor because I think it's a very, very special word. It's reserved for people who actually mentor and aren't subject matter experts and role models. But the guidance that you can give to these young people in the comments that you make is huge. You can't imagine the impact you have on these young people. We've only had in 14 years, 2 really bad experiences. I mean, really nasty, bad things. You know, there's just no reason for that, and there's no excuse for it. So we just, you know, it's a huge opportunity to have an influence on a young person's life that can be very, very meaningful, and it cuts both ways. So,
Well, I agree with that. I'm still spinning on the
On the $1 million bucks?
unpromoted, overlooked opportunity there. I would second actually what both of you said. First, with Alex, I think this idea of is your application truly responsive to the call, and that varies a lot in what we see. It's surprising also, I think. Many competitions, at least as the purse goes up, typically the number of requirements that you're facing also increase. That's not always true, and this is maybe if we're going to talk bad. We're going to talk bad prize practice, having a $5,000 prize with a 40-page application. Is, you know, which is a trend. I mean, there's sort of a debatable point about, do you want to ask enough so that anybody anywhere in the chain of decision making can instantly know the answer to whatever random question they have, or do you want to go with some very short application that's like, it's 2 pages, it costs nothing to apply, the funder's casting a wide net, but you know,
and I have no idea how to judge it.
you know, but well,
Yeah.
and so when you look at the competitions you're applying to, you can maybe see where people are on that continuum and see, are you genuinely a fit? But it's surprising how complicated some of the rules are, and I think one of the most painful things that happens in the funding community is when you have a really excellent application that fails for some stupid reason, and that's really not fun. On the evaluators, we see a range of care that people take with these that varies between, oh my gosh, I looked at this and I can't stand it, and that's all you need to know, and then we have to find somebody else, or you know, page after page after page of really detailed pros and cons, and I think that anybody running one of these owes a lot to the judges and evaluators. I think that's one of the things that's exciting about Unfunded is, you know, the Unfunded list is really helping all of us get better at that, because ideally we'll be performing both roles over the course of our careers.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I would love to open up the floor for questions from the audience. If you want to direct generally or maybe to one specific person.
Hey, good afternoon. It's a general question. Sort of being in this space and kind of some of the buzzwords that are coming up a lot are like social impact and conscious capitalism, things like that. One of the newer ones that I've come across that has really kind of struck me is effective altruism. So it's not enough to just like do fair trade coffee and conscious capitalism, but how is it's the philanthropic community figuring out I think the person or people that have talked about this, like the Gates Foundation and other people that say it's not enough to just be altruistic, but where will my dollar go furthest? Whether it's here in DC versus I can send 500 kids to school in a third world country. And how does the philanthropic community weigh those options when they're giving out money?
I'm happy to take a stab at this. It's funny, we did a first year course for MIT first year students on how to change the world and tried to get them early basically. And one of the first questions this 18-year-old asked me was like, have you heard of effective altruism and what do you think of it? And I was like, God.
That sounds great.
Yeah. And I can't remember the guy who wrote the book about it, so I apologize. But
Singer?
Peter Singer, yeah. I mean, so the good news is that it's the good point about effective altruism is that obviously not all that you should know if you're even having an impact, which is hard to do sometimes, which I'll get back to. And really, ideally, your dollars are spent in the most effective way, right? And that therefore you're able to compare what is more impactful versus how much it costs, basically. Now, the problem with that, so the bad news is, or good news is cash transfers, whether conditional or not, beat out most philanthropy most of the time. So if our job, and it's sort of like index funds, if anybody's familiar with the S&P 500 versus active management, right? Technically, maybe we should all retire and just do a passive index fund and just give money away. And there's evidence in Brazil of people paying, getting cash transfers to send their kids to school, and that was more effective than any other outreach program and anything else. So that's the bad news in the sense that our active management roles are maybe not that useful. I think the good news or the questions is, and this I saw sort of when I was at Save the Children, notably, I used to work at Save the Children a few years back, but also in other contexts, is there's questions of equity. If you're going to have these, and there's some people, one, the Impact Investing Fund that shall remain nameless, which came up with this IMM structure, which tries to sort of dollarize the impact of your work. But the problem with that is that it takes more money to educate a kid in Angola, in a war-torn country, where there are 75 different dialects. Sorry, there are probably not 75, but many dialects in Angola, where the teachers don't speak the same dialects as the kids, and where it's not safe to go to school, versus in India, let's say, or in Kenya or in other places. And that's just within education. But is it fair to say, well, we're just gonna like abandon the Angolan kids because it's more expensive to educate them versus, and we're gonna put all our money in India and Kenya and have a better return in that way. And then there's things which are very much immeasurable, like policy change will take years, and human rights, and in Nancy's case, like educating a whole she's educating this whole generation to be the next Einsteins, and like how she sees the impact over 20 or 30 years maybe, but that's really difficult. So if you I'm all for adopting, measuring your impact and trying to as much as you can, and recognizing the limits of that, and then making as best use of the dollars as you can. And I guess I'm not a passive investor in this case because I'm trying to drive innovation. I think that therefore I need to take risk, and I'm a venture, again, in this case, I'm the venture investor, and so I take very active positions and high risk bets. And so that's where I see that you can't do that in a passive index form. But it's a good debate in the sector for sure. All right, that was long.